Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Julia Crowley, and on behalf of IT at Cork, I'm delighted to welcome you all to our IT at Cork Marine Technology Talk. IT at Cork is a leading technology cluster in the southwest of Ireland, and we represent nearly 200 technology companies. We provide access to training and upskilling, events like this where members can learn the latest in technology trends, as well as other networking and learning and sharing opportunities. This event is part of our Tech Talk series, and we'll look at the latest in marine technology and its impact on the sector as well as on society as a whole. We hope you will find it enlightening and engaging. Our speakers this morning include Liam Fitzgerald from Maori, Clodagh McConnell from the Naval Ordnance Section of the Defence Forces, James Ives from Ex-Ocean, Nessa Malone from 8 West Consulting, and Adrian Boyle from CAFEX. Our MC is Cormac McGrory from the National Maritime College. I would like to thank our MC and all our speakers for their time this morning, and also our Tech Talk Organising Committee for their work in organising this event. So now I'll hand over to you, Cormac, to kickstart the discussions.
Julia, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time this morning to drop by. I hope you find this morning interesting. IT at Cork have brought together an absolutely fantastic group of panelists to talk about a really interesting subject, and I'd like to start by thanking John, Juliet and Vivian for the very kind invitation to MC this event this morning. It's lovely to get an hour's respite from the day job and actually go back to my first love, which is marine technology. So very grateful to IT at Cork for the opportunity, and also to be able to have a conversation with such a fantastic group of panelists this morning. Over the next hour, we'll be sharing our thoughts and our experiences and learnings from various perspectives of working with technology in the marine environment out to sea, including coastal monitoring, which is my area, naval seafaring, research and innovation, commercial autonomous vessel operations, search and rescue, and subsea imaging and measurement. So I'll begin just very quickly introducing our panel this morning, and after that we'll have a short 10-minute introductory talk, and following that then each of the panelists is going to tell us a little bit more about their professional involvement with marine technology, what their organisations do, and so on. So without further ado, let's kick off by introducing this morning's panel. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Liam Fitzgerald in the first instance. Liam, good morning to you. You're very welcome.
Hi, Cormac.
Liam is the Marine Incubation Manager with the Maori SFI Research Centre at UCC. Next we have Lieutenant Commander Clodagh McConnell, who's officer and of the Naval Ordnance Section in the Irish Naval Service, and a very good colleague of mine. Clodagh, good morning.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Next we have Nessa Malone. Nessa is a product manager for SafeTracks, which is the very successful vessel registration, tracking and alerting platform developed by 8 West Consulting. Good morning, Nessa. It's good to see you.
Morning, everyone.
Next we have James Ives. James, very much a thought leader in the maritime technology space, not just in Ireland, but in a broader context as well. James is the founder and CEO of Ex-Ocean, a company that uses uncrewed surface vessels to provide ocean data collection services. Very good morning to you, James.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
It's great to have you here, James. And rounding out our panel this morning is I use the term thought leader in relation to James, and it absolutely applies in relation to our final panelist this morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Adrian Boyle, who is the founder and CEO of CAFEX Ocean, a key company in the subsea imaging and measurement industry, and CAFEX have very much been a thought leader in this space for many years. Adrian, it's great to have you with us.
Good morning, everyone.
So that's our panel. We'll hear a little bit more from each of them in a while, but we're going to begin kicking things off with an overview of the Maori Centre, and Liam Fitzgerald is going to do that for us, and Liam is going to talk to us a little about his work, about marine incubation, and also about some of the great marine tech businesses that are around the southeast of the country at the moment. So Liam, if you're ready, do you want to take it away?
Great, thanks, Cormac. So as Cormac said, over the next 10 minutes or so, I want to give you a brief overview of the Maori Centre, the work I do within the Maori Centre, and talk a little bit about some of the the brilliant technology, marine technology businesses we have down here in the Southwest, and you'll be hearing from the others post my presentation. So the Maori Centre is made up of 13 partner institutions, academic institutions around the country. We're in Cork, Limerick, Dublin, Louth, Galway, Kildare. I suppose particularly relevant to the Southwest, we have UCC, Munster Technological University, and Tyndall National Institute being the three partners down here in the Southwest. There are about 225 researchers associated with the centre, and about 75 industry partners. So it's a very busy, very active centre with reach right around the country. The three broad areas of the three global challenges that Maori focuses on are, in the first instance, the energy transition. Very pertinent in that area is the whole area of marine renewable energy, which is relevant to our discussion today. Global challenge 2 is around climate action, and of course, you know, we're all very aware of the necessity for dealing with the climate crisis as we have it at the minute. And the third global challenge is around the blue economy. And here in Ireland, we have a huge marine resource that I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail as we go through this morning, with 880,000 square kilometres of ocean resource. And really, it's something that we need to take as a huge opportunity for us into the future. The research areas that are of particular relevance to the Maori Centre, so there's 7 research areas, and all of these are relevant, I suppose, to the maritime marine technology. And those 7 areas there on your screen: marine renewable energy technologies, materials and structures, observations and operations, coastal and marine systems, bioenergy, and then various other energy-related research areas. My role within the centre is in supporting all entrepreneurial activity within the centre, ultimately, and that takes many forms, different forms. So there's a couple of pictures on your screen there from pre-COVID times and during COVID times. On the top left, for example, you know, we welcome delegations from around the world that come and meet with us and look at the facilities and talk about marine technology and incubation and startups and so on. So on the top left-hand corner, that was a delegation from Shanghai, for example. Cork City is twinned with Shanghai, and as part of that twinning, we often have people from Shanghai come and look at some of the opportunities here in Ireland. Bottom left is a delegation from Nova Scotia in Canada. There's a real focus on ocean technology, opportunities for startups in ocean technology in Canada, and they're an exemplar, I suppose, internationally for what can be done. Up in the top, you'll see we have the fabulous old Cork Savings Bank building, which is a Cork University Business School building now. So we have events, various events in-person events, which hopefully we're getting back to now, as Cormac says. And on the bottom then, various webinars we've done over the last while to focus on some of the opportunities that are available for different cohorts of people associated with the centre. My role, more particularly, is very much focused on the marine. I'm funded by Enterprise Ireland. Thank you, Enterprise Ireland, for that. And as part of that, I work with startups in the marine, maritime, blue technology area right around the country. So part of that work involves different types of programs that I would be involved in. So just taking a snapshot of 2021, I was involved in a program around sustainable startup ideas with colleagues in UCC, which was available to anybody with an interest in sustainable ideas. A 7-week pre-accelerator program, which I suppose helped people to kickstart their ideas and get some initial structure around how best to move forward with an idea and to get to the types of levels that we would hope the James Ives and the Adrian Boyles and people like that get to. We also had a 3-month program, a sustainable, there again focused on the sustainable future, where we had a masterclass series and a competition over a 3-month period with about 6 hours of online content, there again focusing on the initial stages of developing out an idea and putting some structure around that idea in order to progress. So we had about 1,000 people engaged in that process over 3 months. We had 50 entries to a competition and with €15,000 in prize money. So that was there again a very successful and useful series of events in 2021. And finally, and very particular to the blue technology, marine technology area, in November 21, I led a 6-week online pre-accelerator program for tech entrepreneurs. My work over the last 4 years suggests that we need to do more to encourage people in at the beginning, I suppose, of their entrepreneurial journey in marine technology. So a pre-accelerator program, this was the idea for this program. We had 11 participants and we had projects across marine renewable energy, aquaculture, seaweed, marine transport, and others. So they're the types of events, delegations, programs that I'm involved in. And then, of course, I'm involved in one-to-one support work with various startups. I would have interacted with about 130 startups over the last 4 years or so. There's some logos on screen now of some of the startups I think we will be hearing more about over the next couple of years. And so one-to-one work with these types of startups would be a key part of the work I do. So this morning is about marine technology, as Cormac has said, and it's about maybe shining a light on what's going on locally, to be slightly parochial about it, in the Southwest. And so I just have 3 examples of great marine technology businesses that I just wanted to maybe point out to get people thinking about the opportunity for technology applied in a marine context, because I think this is one of the things maybe I'd be hopeful that people will go away with today. Some people on the call today might have technologies and haven't thought about the marine as a potential vertical for application, as it were. So Exceedance is a great example of a business that was spun out of research done in the Maori Centre. It's a spin out of UCC. Ray Alcorn and John Keating spun it out back in 2015, and they're focused, it's essentially a fintech business, if you like. They offer a financial due diligence solution for the international marine renewable energy market. Their cloud platform allows users to build, analyze, and optimize technology and financial models across the various marine renewable energy solutions, wind, tidal, and wave energy. So a good example of a Cork headquartered business with a fintech drive. The second example is Netfasa. Netfasa is based down in Dingle in County Kerry. A business that's focused on or driven by machine learning and IoT, and they're looking to design and are designing, developing, and deploying innovative solutions focused on Industry 4.0. And Netfasa are involved currently in a partnership with Vodafone Global IoT Network, and they're looking at how to effectively and better track individual shipping containers, and then by using AI, predicting where these containers are at any particular point in time. So are they sitting on a truck? Are they sitting on a ship? Are they sitting in a port? And as we all know, during COVID-19, the availability of shipping containers was a big issue, and shipping containers were sitting in the wrong ports, and people were unable to track where containers were. So this is a really interesting technology that Netfasa are developing, and they're working with Tyndall National Institute right now on the battery life of the device they use to stick on the side of a container, so that ultimately the battery will last as long as the device. So really interesting work being done, headquartered down there in Dingle in County Kerry. And the final example, and this is close to home for me because I live down in Youghal, and we have a fabulous business down here in Youghal, Safe Haven Marine. It's 25 years plus in operation now. They've built 150 vessels over that 25-year period, 50 pilot vessels, and they've supplied them to 28 countries around the world. So these guys are global leaders in their field. Safe Haven there again, to connect back with the brilliant facilities we have down in Maori. We have the Lear National Ocean Test Facility, and the most recent version of the Safe Haven Thunderchild 2, which is the XSV20, that was tank tested in the Lear National Ocean Test Facility. So we have a world-class facility in the Maori Centre, which can be used for anything that goes in water. So that's the connection, I suppose, with the Maori Centre there. And interestingly, in 2021, with that Thunderchild 2 vessel, Safe Haven were successful in setting a new world record for a North Atlantic crossing in a powerboat, which is incredible. So That's all from me, really, Cormac. Just to say that it's really exciting to be on this webinar this morning, and you're going to hear now from world-class marine technology businesses and people. So back to you, Cormac.
Liam, thanks so much for that. Yeah, I think you picked three tremendous examples of Irish blue economy companies working in three very different areas. Exceedance, you know, as you say, working in fintech for maritime applications and the offshore renewables space primarily. Netvasa, who are in IT supply chain, and I think we've all become hugely conscious in the last couple of years of how dependent the world is, both economically and societally, on supply chains. And the role of IT in supply chains can't be overstated. And I find it interesting, Liam, and we might come back to it later in the conversation this morning, about the power challenge of working with IT out to sea. It's one of the three big challenges in my head in relation to working with IT at sea. And Safe Haven, yeah, I mean, what a fantastic success story. And I've had the privilege of doing a very small bit of work with Safe Haven back in the day, and I think maybe Nessa might touch on something as well later. So look, Liam, thank you so much. I think you've set the scene wonderfully there. And the take-home message for me is that there's significant innovation, significant startup activity going on in the marine tech space in Ireland. That's hugely healthy. And as you say, I think a challenge that we have collectively is to try and get even more people involved in this really exciting space. So look, Liam, thank you for that. If I can move on and start with each of the panelists now and ask you to tell us a little bit about what you do and your background and so on. Clodagh, if I could start with you. Clodagh is somebody I've had the privilege of working with in NMCI on and off for a number of years now, and hugely capable technology professional and working in an extraordinary organisation in the Irish Naval Service. So it's great to have you here, Clodagh. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your involvement in marine technology, and what does your day job involve from a perspective?
So I'm very happy to be here, Cormac, and I suppose from my point of view that we can give you some kind of end user perspective, because as you know, most of our operations are at sea. But I think today there'll be such an interesting perspective because we all come from different angles. So we're very happy to participate in something like this and just to engage in whatever the direction the conversation will go in. So just to talk about myself, I'm an electronic engineer in the Irish Naval Service. I joined in 2002, and I was a graduate backpacker in Australia back then, living in a tent and, you know, traveling around. And I came home for Christmas and there was a higher skills recruitment fair at the RDS, and they were looking for electronic engineering graduates. And I said, you know what, I'm going to jump in here, 6 months, join the Navy and pay off a loan. And that, my friends, was 20 years ago. So the variety and the challenges that we have every day is actually something that's very appealing to me, you know. But one of the most important things that we do with our operations is technology. We're heavily dependent on it. As you know, I'll just share 2 slides there quickly, if you don't mind, just to give you some context. Please do, Clodagh. So as you know, the Naval Service have recently celebrated their 75th anniversary. So this is one of our ships coming alongside in Dublin, the P60 class, which is a really tech-savvy vessel compared to some of our old ones. And the most of the work that the Navy would do protecting Ireland's interests in the seas is our maritime security defence operations, maritime interdiction operations, search and rescue, fishery protection, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. So all of these taskings that we're given, while they're quite varied, depend heavily on technology. But one of the interesting things and the balance that we need to strike is between the crew on board, and every single person has a particular job, and the technology. So there's a kind of a balance between having somebody with a particular job to do and whether or not this technology kind of meets this kind of challenge or whatever, so that we can conduct it. But one thing that's very important is the environment in which we work. So this is a real iconic picture of the Navy, and Liam had touched on it there about the harsh, I suppose, the elements. We're at the mercy of Mother Nature. So this picture is P-51 Ellie Roisin responding to a search and rescue for the HMS Chickadew, which is a Victorian class diesel submarine that there was an electrical fire, a fire with the electrical panel on board, and we had to respond 100 miles off Donegal. And the weather that day was absolutely horrendous. There were 16-foot waves. You know, all of the technology and systems on board here are affected by salt water, which is relentless. It gets in absolutely everywhere. And as you know, electronics and salt water do not mix. So we have this balance between, we have to work in this environment. It's pretty much the only, we cannot do anything about it. But the technicians and the crew on board have to conduct more maintenance with our kind of balance between this technology and not. So we're kind of at the mercy of this environment. So there is some of our operations that are actually, we're very, as I said, very technical dependent, but there's some operations that we just need the people to do. So search and rescue, while technology helps us, there is elements of drug smuggling or arms smuggling or something that we need kind of people to do this balance between. So we're very happy to involve in any of the kind of innovation projects that the Naval Service, we are involved with Carlow IT, we have a defence organisation. A lot of our students are in Munster Technology University. We have very close ties with the National Maritime College, and every day is a different challenge. So we don't really know what we're going to be involved in, but we're very happy to take any kind of system, bring it out to sea, and no doubt a sailor will give you a good R&D about whether or not it's sustainable. But we just have to balance that between being in the environment, having a job for the personnel, and making sure that we embrace technology in some way. So we're very excited to see what happens today and how the conversation progresses.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, so Claudia was being polite there. The Naval Service has provided great support to the research team in NMCI by taking equipment that we've naively built and gone, this will do really well, and they've taken it to sea and broken it for us on a regular basis. But that's part of the process. And Claudia, you've touched on, I think, what is one of the major challenges of working with technology in a marine environment. And the environment is utterly unforgiving. And I'm sure you'll hear that from everybody this morning. Listen, thanks for that, Claudia. We'll pick up on a number of points that you've touched on there, and particularly the people and technology interface. I think, again, that's a really interesting area. And I know James in particular has a very interesting take on that one. So thanks, Claudia. If we can move on to you, Nessa. I think actually it's a nice segue, people and technology and what you're involved with SafeTracks and with 8 West Consulting. So tell us a little bit about your world, Nessa.
Sure. Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on. So I am the product manager of SafeTracks, which is a vessel tracking and alerting platform. The platform was developed by the company I work for, 8 West. 8 West is a business consulting and software development company based here in Cork, out in Curraheen. We're here since probably 1998. There's about 220 people employed, and our primary focus is to provide technology solutions for our clients in the healthcare, retail and marine sectors. So vastly different sectors and industries, but lots of crossovers in terms of technologies and development principles, etc., used in those. So I actually started out in the marketing department of 8 West, or DCare Systems Ireland, as it was known then, about 17 years ago. So I had done a commerce degree in UCC, and I guess my role was very much focused on promoting and marketing 8 West as an international software development and consulting company. But then my role, I suppose, started to evolve as we begun exploring the concept of a maritime safety platform through the use of smartphones. And that was back in 2011. And in particular, we were looking at how recreational boat users or leisure craft users could take advantage of the growing use of smartphone apps for safety purposes. And so at the time, we developed a very simple smartphone app on Android and iPhone, on which recreational craft users could log their sail plan. So they would put in their estimated time of arrival, the number of people on board, their start, waypoint and endpoint, etc. And if they weren't back by the time that they had entered into the smartphone app, it would raise an alert to their emergency contacts and also notify the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard then could log into a monitoring console, and they would have access to personal information, vessel tracking, or the vessel details, the emergency contact details, and most importantly, the actual tracking details. So the aim was at the time, and is still very much, to take the search out of search and rescue, to reduce the time it gets to the person in distress. So since then, we've enhanced the features of the SafeTracks platform. The main feature now actually is an emergency and assistance calling function, so that if a person makes an emergency call through the SafeTracks app, it geofences their location and starts recording their position and reporting it every 5 minutes to the SafeTracks server. So again, that gives an updated position to the lifeboat crew when they're on the water on a mission, and again reducing the time it gets to take to the person, or takes to get to the person even. So last year there was 900 search and rescue missions activated to the SafeTracks app, and that's across 11 countries. So SafeTracks is used in 11 countries with multiple Coast Guard agencies, non-profit search and rescue organisations, military and maritime organisations. So they're very much our clients, and obviously in each country the search and rescue job as such differs quite differently between countries. So about 3 or 4 years ago then, we were approached by Sony Network Communications Europe to discuss the concept of SafeTracks on a wearable device. And I guess at the time we had already started to look into and researching wearable devices using Internet of Things or IoT networks such as Sigfox and LoRa. And what we were looking to do was to provide an alternative means of tracking and alerting for wet water sports users. So those that don't take their smartphone on the water, they don't necessarily want to take their €900 phone with their life on it out on the water. So it was just to find an alternative means for them. So we worked with Sony, and they had a device called the M-Safety device, which is this watch here. I'm not sure if you can see that. But it provided a number of key features for us, and was really exactly what we were looking for in terms of exceptional battery life, accurate GPS, a secure connection to the SafeTracks server, a global roaming profile that allows the user to always be connected. So there's no need to bring a phone with you while you're when you're going in the water if you had something like this. So essentially, it's the world's first dedicated search and rescue watch that is directly connected to search and rescue organizations. And what's really interesting as well is that from that we developed variants to work on the M-Safety. So variants of the SafeTracks app for, say, lone working or healthcare monitoring. So for example, a wind farm operative in the North Sea could wear one of these watches and could use it for tracking and alerting. That would really benefit them from a health and safety perspective. So as a product manager, I work closely with search and rescue professionals, Coast Guard agencies in those 11 countries. And essentially they shape the future technical and operational aspects of the platform. We're very fortunate to have really good working relationships with those organizations. We have an annual user group every year to reflect on the previous year and plan ahead. So it's very much, the platform is very much driven by that user group. And also from a delivery perspective, I'm responsible for managing the team of developers, creative designers, testers, technical architects, etc., to ensure the delivery of the solution. As a product then, I guess, I'm involved in all aspects of product development, and regardless if you're, selling a mouse or a pencil or whatever it is, there's all aspects of business development, marketing, legal, etc., that you kind of work directly with as well. So it's a really, really interesting role, and I'm very fortunate to have traveled a lot and meet some really amazing people. And I think that's the one thing while working in the blue economy, you do meet some really, really great characters and very interesting people.
That's so true, Nessa. Yeah, it's certainly a huge part of the reason I'm still in this industry 33 years later. You do meet an extraordinary type of human being, if you will. And look, this is an absolutely, the SafeTracks story is an amazing one. And for those of us who work in, if you will, hardcore primary maritime activity out to sea, the bar for organisations like search and rescue agencies and coast guards adopting new technology is incredibly high, and I think it's an indicator of the calibre of the professionalism and the quality of the product that 8 West have produced with Safe Tracks, that it has been so widely deployed so quickly around the world. Thanks, Nessa. That's a brilliant introduction to what's a great product. I think we might touch a bit more on wearable tech before we finish this conversation. If I can move on and a very different perspective, a very different activity. James, ex-Ocean, I was at the Infomar Irish Seabed Survey Seminar in Dublin Castle last Monday week, and it was absolutely fantastic to walk into the courtyard in Dublin Castle and see one of the ex-Ocean vessels sitting there with a big crowd of people around it going, what's this thing, you know? So James, tell us a little bit about ex-Ocean and about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, very good. Look, thanks very much again for having us on today. So yeah, ultimately this for us is all about data. And I guess if we take a big step back, you know, the ocean economy is set to double to 3 trillion by the end of this decade. And we would believe that the foundation of that growth is data. Anything you do at sea, you need some form of data. And what we're doing at ex-Ocean is we're looking to innovate in that data space in probably 2 ways. The first one is around how we collect that data. So rather than sending a vessel offshore with a conventional vessel offshore with a crew on board, we've developed a robotic system, which you'd have seen in Dublin Castle there, which is around the size of an average car, about half its weight, hybrid powered. But it's satellite controlled. So effectively it can go offshore, it can go and collect the data that's needed without operators going offshore with it. Obviously there's some key benefits with doing this. Obviously there's a safety benefit, and we've just talked about, you know, the less people that need to go offshore, there's obviously inherent safety benefits with that. The environment is hugely important. So a smaller vessel, as in ours, around about 1,000th of the fuel consumption of a conventional vessel. So it's a big environmental benefits. And ultimately, we believe we can deliver the data at a lower cost, which means that more data can be collected. I think the second way that we would look to innovate is that we don't actually sell our technology. What we sell is the data that we collect with the technology. So what we do is we typically take a scope of work from a client, we give them a fixed price, and we go and collect that data. So ultimately it's a data purchase rather than a say, marine contract that we're entering into. So what sort of data do we collect? Really everything from mapping the seabed, inspecting subsea assets, so things like subsea cables, collecting environmental data. And I think a really good example of this is a market which is just growing tremendously fast, which is offshore wind. If you take an offshore wind development, it needs data throughout, say, a 30-year lifespan. So the first 3 or 4 years, there's intense surveys required to plan the project, to identify where the turbine is going to be installed, the cable routes, the landings. Huge amount of data is required during that planning phase. Then you get into the construction phase. There's 1 or 2 years of construction work. Again, repeat survey. So, for example, we're doing that out in Taiwan at the moment for Ørsted, is supporting a very large offshore wind development there, where every day foundations are going in and they need to be surveyed. You then move into the operational life, which might be 25 years of regular surveys required to check that you know, every aspect of the offshore wind farm, including things like the security of the cables, checking their depth of burial and so on. And then finally, at the end, which we're not really at in this industry yet, is decommissioning. But there's a requirement to do a lot of survey work during a decommissioning phase to ensure that you return the seabed to how it was before the wind farm was ever constructed. So, you know, it's a great example of, I guess, an industry that just has a huge need for data. So I guess we are new technology, and we are really at the cutting edge of this type of way of collecting data. So I guess in terms of track record, we've been really fortunate. So to date, we've completed around 35,000 hours of offshore operations with our system. We're just building hull number 20 at the moment, so we're scaling our technology quickly. We would have delivered over 100 projects across 17 different countries around the world, everything from the Canadian Arctic right through, as I say, to Taiwan and lots of locations in between. And I think as a good example of, I guess, marine technology and the need for it, we're seeing tremendous growth. So a year ago, we had 41 people in the company. Today, we've got 120. And we're aiming to recruit another 100 people over the first 6 months of this year. So I guess that's just a response to the need for ocean data and the requirements there. But one of the numbers that I really love the most is just around the carbon emissions. through using our system, we've offset the need to use larger conventional vessels. We believe in the last year we've saved 22,000 tons of CO2 being emitted, which is a really meaningful contribution, I think, to really what we want to see, which is really responsible development of the ocean economy, and that really underpins everything we do. So yeah, that's a very quick picture of what we're doing, and it's great to be on the panel with everybody. And I know we're going to hear some exciting things from Adrian in a minute as well.
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, that's fantastic. 20 hulls. I had no idea you were at that scale of activity already. It's absolutely fantastic, and indeed, I hadn't fully appreciated the environmental benefit here. I think you've laid that out brilliantly. Yeah, if I can move on, Adrian. I mean, Cathex. I mean, a household name in our sector for collecting data in those incredibly challenging environments. And, Cathex is known as an innovator for delivering, systems that work in these incredibly challenging environments. And you guys have been doing it a long time. Data is your business, the services around it's your business. Tell us a little bit more about Cathex and what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I think what I'll do, if I can share my screen, I'm just hoping I can, but let me just give a bit of an introduction. Cathex, we started the business in 2009, and at that time, our focus was really around underwater subsea imaging. So where James talks about the uncrewed surface vessels and wind farms, we go a little bit deeper in the sense that, and I'm sure, and I've talked to James about this in the past, when you have a crewed vessel, what we provide are the imaging systems that sit on the remotely operated vehicle that typically comes off that crewed vessel. And the two kind of technologies are remote operated vehicles and autonomous underwater vehicles. So they're a step beyond the surface vessels, and they're the next kind of phase, if you think about it, in James's business as well. How do you go from surface vessels to collecting data in the underwater, in the deep water environment in particular? So from a Cathex point of view, we specialized in deep water systems and deep water imaging over the last 5-6 years. And the big thing that we did differently on the imaging side was we essentially reduced the time taken to acquire visual data, so large area images and measurement data. And by reduce it, I mean, traditionally an ROV would travel at 0.5 knots. We came along and we changed that to 5 knots. So the fact that the boat costs in the region of between $50,000 and $100,000 a day, that led to a substantial uptake in deep water oil and gas operations, in environmental monitoring operations, and of course in oceanography and ocean monitoring. So our success since 2014, 2015, when we deployed the first deep water systems, was very much around that reduction, because that reduction means it's a reduction in boat time. James talked about carbon dioxide emissions. I think we calculated something like over 30 days, it's 400 tons of CO2 reduction. And if you take all the pipeline in the world, you can kind of multiply that by a few thousand, right? So we got heavily adopted into that sector. What we've seen happen more recently is that industry transition, as James talked about, to uncrewed surface vessels and autonomy, underwater autonomy. And what that actually requires, and how we set out to do things in the first place was, if you think about now that you have an imaging system working 10 times faster than it used to, in the past you'd have people on the boat watching the video, but now it's like they're trying to watch that at high speed. So it's like watching a Netflix movie in 10 minutes. It just doesn't work. So what we've had to do is develop the automation technologies to process that data at the time of collection. And how we do that is essentially we collect not just video images or still images, but we also collect laser data. We process the laser data. That becomes an automated detection system that filters out the events. So where we have a huge rate, this being about information technology, what we've now got is a situation where if you take about 3 images per second and you're out there for 2 weeks at a time, you've got to process that information at the time of collection. And what we're specializing now is, if you like, that shift towards robotics automation and extraction of information at the time of collection to facilitate autonomous operations and also uncrewed operations, so that, from an uncrewed vessel point of view, certainly you want to have real-time situational awareness, obstacle avoidance in the underwater component. You got to keep in mind the distances here for very deep water, even mid-deep water, 2 kilometers. You could have an ROV 2 kilometers below the uncrewed vessel, And there's substantial risk with that if you've nobody on the boat. I'm sure Claude and the guys could talk about what happens when you put something off the side of the boat when there's 20 people there to support it. But if you imagine a situation where you've nobody to support it, it needs a certain amount of reliability in all the subsystems, and you need to know what's going on around you and have real-time communications from the underwater components. So that's an area that we've seen substantial growth in. It's driven on one level, if you think about it, autonomous vehicles today are autonomous, but they're not really automated. So they can go from point to point and collect data, but they currently don't have the intelligence on them to process that data and relay information and even make machine decisions locally. So that's where we specialize. And certainly the industry that we're moving into is moving in that direction. And I can't manage to share my screen, unfortunately, but it seems like
that's okay, Adrian. I think we've got an absolutely fantastic sense. And again, I think what this has brought home, particularly, you know, the perspective offered by James, and then how you added to that. I think for those on the call who wouldn't necessarily be that familiar with the marine and the maritime domain, it is, of course, you know, four-dimensional. There is the surface, there's the subsea, there's actually the domain above the sea surface, which, for example, is of very particular interest, for example, to the naval service in particular, but also there's the time dimension. And one of the enormous challenges we have in the marine domain in terms of understanding our environment, of mapping it, of knowing what's going on there, is the sheer scale of the environment that needs to be understood. And you know, we're in a situation at the moment where really it's almost a drop in the ocean, if you'll excuse the metaphor. So, you know, the kind of work that Adrian's company are doing, that James's company are doing, is hugely important in this space. I'm not going to talk very much at all about what I do, and just to mention briefly that my particular area of interest and what the Halpin Research Centre in NMCI, one of our focus areas, is on data collection in the coastal zone, which is basically where the land meets the sea. So I've worked a lot over the last 25 years in coastal data collection systems, and my particular interest is in radar, and again, very similar to the kinds of perspectives that have been offered by the panel this morning. We're looking at the use at leveraging, you know, evolutions in sustainable data collection using, you know, low power systems, zero footprint systems, we call them, that have no impact on the environment in which they're placed, or minimal, and again, trying to collect, to analyze data at the point of capture to reduce data backhaul, because that can often be a significant challenge. So there's a couple of major themes have emerged from, you know, and we're kind of moving into a Q&A section now. Autonomy and the changing role of people and technology in the marine environment is one. Data and the central role of data and data analytics. The need for situational awareness, you know, in SafeTrax's work, that's about, you know, being able to get to people who need help. In the naval services context, it's about understanding what's going on out there so that they can provide, you know, the defence, the security, the support services that are needed. In Adrian and James's world, it's collecting that data, and indeed in my own, for whatever it's required. I mean, if I can throw a question out to the panel, what do you see as being the major changes that have happened in recent years in the use of tech out to sea, and what do you think are maybe some of the big areas as we move ahead? I mean, you know, with all of this data floating around, what about cybersecurity, for example? Claudia, maybe if you want to kick off on that one.
So yeah, so the cybersecurity, as you know, we were involved recently with the supporting for the HSE attack, and I won't go into the operational reasons on that, but in general, being at sea and having kind of connectivity to land is actually a huge problem. So like, if you get a little bit of data, you're delighted, and then next minute you want more. And like, it comes back to our recruits and cadets that join at the minute, they're so tech savvy, like they're so dependent on technology. So like, when we went out to sea and we didn't have any internet connectivity, they were like, sorry, we can't function with this, you know? Yeah. So we started off by having a small amount of, having a WhatsApp ability at sea. Next minute, we have 4G now in all of the cabins. I mean, the guys can play their games and do all this kind of stuff. But that leads us to being susceptible to people knowing where we are when we're conducting our operations. So this is a very thin balance between being kind of covert or not being seen, and also the need for to be seen. So there's this kind of balance between the two, but you're also susceptible to being attacked. And that is just the modern day. We just kind of nearly have to outsmart them if possible.
Yeah. And James, I mean, from your perspective, you're collecting data. Do you store and backhaul later? And Adrian, this is also a question for you guys. Or is there an element of live data backhaul going on now? And, you know, do you have those concerns about cybersecurity as well?
Yeah, so look, I think, you know, I'd agree with everything Claude has said. I think it's really interesting. You know, satellite technology is improving all the time. I think, you know, even in the last 3 years, I think we're on our third iteration of satellite comms that we're using, just because it is moving so quickly, and it's moving in a positive way. You know, bandwidths are improving, and also price is decreasing. And then you've got things like, you know, Skylink on the horizon that are going to potentially transform these things. So very, very rapidly moving sector. What we do is we constantly have the same battle, is we're trying to use a certain amount of bandwidth, and we're trying to do as much as we possibly can with it. What we do currently is we try and do as much edge processing as possible. So if you can imagine that the USV, say it's in Taiwan at the moment, it's busy surveying foundations. So we have surveyors that are logged into that vessel live. So what they're able to do is they're able to actually view the quality of the data being collected while that's happening. And so what they're able to do is make sure there are no gaps in the data. They can check that they're getting the right density and the right quality. But what we can do is go another step, is actually start doing some of the processing on the USV itself. We've got a lot of, it's effectively a floating computer. We've got a lot of processing power. So what we can do is we can then go that next step of actually doing some processing, and then start to bring back some results from the data that we've collected. What we can't do yet, just because satellite technology isn't there, I mean, we're collecting terabytes, if not petabytes of data. There's just no satellite system that could move that data. So what we do is we then do a port call. Most vessels come into port to change the crew or get reprovisioned. We do a port call to drop data, and we take hard drives off the vessel with very large volumes of the raw data for advanced processing.
Yeah, that's fantastic, James. And Adrian, you actually touched on this about the processing at the edge, if you will. Now, your context was you're obviously collecting imagery. I mean, I think that's as big as data gets. So, I mean, how are you guys dealing with this? And you know, how do you look at the whole question of the security of that data?
Yeah, I think for us, it's actually more on the client side. So once we've got the data and we deliver data to them, we have certain obligations in terms of how that data gets stored, retrieved, accessed. And, you know, there's a fair bit of resource needed to put the right systems in place. But on the edge processing piece, you know, you could look at it in a funny kind of way and say, as James said, there's terabytes and petabytes. Actually, there's so much data that, you know, much like the people we're collecting the data for, they don't want the data, they want the information in the data. And in fact, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So it's no use to anybody. So, you know, in as much as security, they mightn't like a picture of a certain defect or a certain, you know, whatever the application is, a certain piece of information, trying to find that in petabytes and terabytes of imagery is like a needle in a haystack. And I do think from a Catholics point of view, what we've learned in the last few years is the procedures and processes we use for our data, actually, they haven't quite figured out how to use that for non-visual data. So we actually have programs at the moment looking at processing and automating multi-beam data, CP data, cathodic protection data, using the same kind of methodologies we developed for the visual side. But the whole idea of what we do is we're pushing it all to the edge, so that, you know, if you think about it, we built our imaging sensors to collect data in a different way to conventional imaging sensors. They're not just requiring video, they're requiring multiple sets of data. And in fact, if you layer on the other data to that visual data, you start to get a much deeper set of data that you can perform analysis on at the edge. So the cybersecurity piece is less critical. It is important, but where it kicks in for us is when that data gets into the cloud servers or into our local storage, and we got to make sure nobody accidentally lets the important bits of that out to anywhere else.
Yeah. So what I'm getting here is this is the movement of the data is a challenge for all of us still. Something increasingly perhaps is taken for granted in a shore context, but we still have to think hard about how we're going to get data around the place. And Nessa, in relation to SafeTracks, I guess maybe you guys aren't dealing with large volume data, but you do analytics requirement because, and I think Adrian touched on it really nicely there, it's this data to information to knowledge piece. And we want to get across to our end users, if you will, in your case, the Coast Guards, is that knowledge bit that A, somebody is in trouble, and B, this is where they are.
Yeah, exactly, and it's I suppose because you're talking about as well, like having data on a smartphone, which is everybody has them, and it varies in terms of security, in terms of an Apple versus an Android phone. But the type of data that we send across and we manage is personal information. It's personal location, it's names, addresses, and phone numbers. So it's the type of data that I suppose from the perspective of 8 West, we're actually quite used to dealing with in our backgrounds from the retail and healthcare sector. So we're ISO certified, and we're very much, we have that background in managing that type of data and securing it and all that. But as well, you're dealing with, I suppose, varying types of clients, from military, police versus volunteer search and rescue organizations to government, Coast Guard agencies. So they have their own complexities in terms of their operating procedures, their the server infrastructure as well. So it presents its own challenges.
As in all industries, the customer is still king. Yeah. Conscious of time, we've about 9 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about the future. And Liam, I think you're in a wonderful position to give us a sense of what's going on in the startup space. I mean, we've got lots of innovators on the panel this morning. But what are you seeing, Liam, as maybe emerging trends? I mean, you touched on, the energy transition and climate change. I think all of us are so conscious about that. It's been very interesting that Adrian and James have both talked about this, and about the fact that they're very, very conscious in operating their businesses about the contribution that they can and are making to reducing carbon emissions and all that. So Liam, what as somebody who's involved in the incubation space, what are you seeing as emerging themes, if you will, in terms of maritime technology at the moment?
Yeah, well, I suppose in terms of the marine renewable energy is obviously huge, Cormac, and very significant from a Maori context. And looking, for example, at the most recent program that I did, the Blue Tech Ideas Lab, you probably had about 60% of the people on that looking at some solutions for offshore wind development. And James made reference to it there. Offshore wind is where that industry is at right now. Wave and tidal and so on and so forth are just, in terms of the commerciality, I suppose, of those technologies, have a way to go. But I think it's very interesting to hear the contributions that everybody has made today around, data is obviously of massive importance. The challenge of working in such a hostile environment out there at sea, is an interesting one. And I suppose one of the areas that I'm involved in as part of my work in Maori is we are collaborators, or one of the partner institutions in the ESA Space Solutions Centre Ireland, which is European Space Agency funded in partnership with Enterprise Ireland. And it's interesting to actually think about, your space is a hostile environment, quite obviously. The marine is a hostile environment. So, looking at opportunities, what we're doing as part of Space Solutions Ireland is helping startup businesses and SMEs to maybe look at technologies currently available in a space context for application terrestrially, and also looking at technologies available terrestrially, maybe in an ocean context, for example, that might be applicable in space, given the similarities there.
Yeah, so, I think that's a great point, actually. I'm sorry to cut across you, but I think it's worth emphasizing that a little bit. The knowledge transfer opportunities here. I mean, the people on this call, because maritime is such an incredibly challenging environment, whether it's power, whether it's, the environment, whether it's communications and so on, there's a lot of acquired knowledge and experience, which I think is transferable into other sectors. And just to mention as well, before I hand back to you, Liam, that also you talk about space, which absolutely, and we've worked together on some of that stuff. There's also the agriculture sector. Some of the most interesting breakthroughs we've had in NMCI in recent years have actually been out from talking with people in the agriculture sector. And wearables for cattle is a pretty big challenge, and if you get it to work around a cow, it actually works pretty well in a marine environment as well. So just to drop that in, Liam, sorry, go on.
Absolutely, Carl. So, to answer the question, really, as I said in my piece at the beginning, I hope those on the call today will go away from the call and think about, wow, there are significant challenges in a marine and maritime environment globally, that my technology might have a solution for. And that's really something that I would be very strong on, hopefully getting across, because, you know, you've got IoT, and Nessa mentioned that you've got IoT, you've got machine learning, you've got AI, you've got data processing, you've processing at the edge, you've got huge amounts of data to try and actually deal with. As Claude said, that connectivity at sea, there's so much opportunity really probably in the blue technology area for startups, for scale-ups, for SMEs. You know, it's a really exciting time to be involved, really.
It is, Liam, and it's fantastic. And I think maybe it's perhaps the last point that we'll get to talk a little bit about this morning. But I'd like to ask all of you, you know, technology is enabled by people. It's powered by people. And maybe just briefly, I'll start with you, Claude, but I'd like all panelists to make a quick contribution on this one. In terms of the skill sets, the workforce, as we move on from here, what's your view on that? I mean, I'm kind of guessing we need a lot more people in this space.
We need an awful lot more people. But one of our neighbours next door, the Royal Navy, are going to come out with a multi-role ocean surveillance vessel in 2024. And this vessel is going to be used to survey deep sea cables and a lot of ROVs and all that. There will be a crew of 15 people on board this vessel. So like, we have to come with this sea change of like, people are being replaced. But I'll give you a nice term that you can drop in during coffee, which is the Mark I eyeball, which is a military term. So no matter what technology you come in, you always need to go back to the people and just throw
I think
Mark I eyeball on everything.
Yeah, people's roles are changing, I think, but we're still going to need them. Adrian, what's your take on it? I mean, you've been in this space longer than most of us. Have you seen changes in the skill sets and the people, and what do you see happening as we move on?
Yeah, I think in the earlier days, maybe 3-4 years ago, you would find all of what we'd call in the industry the data processors kind of saying, well, what am I going to do if this is all automated? And I think my answer was, well, you should become a data scientist, because at the end of it, it needs, you know, the data and how we actually operate. We offer services today. We provide inspection software where people provide data input to the 3D models and to the data we collect. But that data actually becomes the learning on which we base the machine vision, machine processing. And in fact, the transition, you know, I think no matter what the traditional roles were, automation won't replace people. Automation, if anything, will create, you bring this right back to brass tacks. To give you an idea, if you calculate the area of all of the pipelines in the world in the subsea sector, given a 5-meter swath for the parts that are not buried, it's about 500 square kilometers, right? And then you look at the overall area, let's say, of the mineral mining zone in the middle of the Pacific. That's an environmental kind of, there's a massive debate going on. It's 4.5 million square kilometers. So the real challenge is, how do you actually transition away from this concept that everything is asset-based, where it's actually a tiny area of the ocean, into, well, if we're trying to do what we're trying to do, we need scaling robotics on a massive scale, you know, where we can actually send boats out for years at a time to collect vast amounts of information, and we need all of the technology. So the roles and the people absolutely change, but actually it's because of the way things are done at the moment. I'm sure James can talk about how many people are required to process data. I certainly can as well. But if you move away and you've automated that, then absolutely what we're really trying to get to is collect more information on the ocean, not data. And that actually requires an awful lot more data and an awful lot more technology to get information from that data.
Yeah, I think, James, I beg your pardon, Adrian, you've really hit on something important there. Yeah, it's the change of roles, but we're certainly going to need more. And James, I mean, I think, you know, yes, not at sea, but you've obviously got lots and lots of people involved in managing the process that you're involved in.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and you know, just really echoing what Adrian is saying. It's you know, technology. What it's doing is it's transforming the way people are working. So, so in our world, what we're able to offer is experienced mariners. We're able to offer them a route to continue to be an experienced mariner or an experienced surveyor, but do that without having to go offshore. That has huge benefits from a work-life balance, and I'm sure everybody's seeing it. I'm sure Claude is seeing the same. You know, the ability to leave people onshore but have connection to the vessel and the systems means that they can work in a different way. So there's huge benefits for this, I think, for the workforce, and yeah, I think technology just creates more opportunity than anything else.
Yeah, listen, James, thank you so much. And look, guys, unfortunately, we could spend another hour talking about this and so many other areas, but we're out of time. Listen, on behalf of myself and on behalf of IT at Cork, and I'm sure all of those who've tuned in this morning, thank you so much for giving of your time, Clodagh, Liam, Adrian, Nessa, James. It's been absolutely fascinating for me. I'm sure it's been of great interest to everybody. To everybody listening this morning, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It is an extraordinary arena, marine technology. It's an extraordinary environment, and it is one because, in no small reason, climate change, because of the changing energy imperative and so on. You know, the future is very, very much in the oceans, and we're in that world, and we would love more people to come and join us. We obviously need the workforce skills, so it would be absolutely fantastic to see more people coming into the sector. Just to thank IT at Cork for facilitating, for organising this morning. They've put together a fantastic panel. It's been a privilege to host this morning, to MC this morning. And my thanks to John, the chair of IT at Cork, and also very much to Juliet and to Vivian for all their support to us, the panel, to get this together today. And lastly, IT at Cork have just asked me to let you know that the next webinar takes place on April 7th, if I have that correct. And the topic on that occasion will be AI. So I'll definitely be tuning into that one, another area where I'm sure everybody on this call has a great degree of interest. So thank you everybody for attending this morning. It's been really, really interesting, and thanks to the panelists for your time and for your contributions. And I hope everybody has a really great day. So take care, everybody. All the best.